there was an influence of the Zulu chief, right? Chief Bhambatha. In what sense was that an influence on Gandhi's life?
That is exactly the personality I wanted to come to. And I wanted to say that the question of the larger identity of the Africans was at the back of his mind, but it was not at the top of his own political agenda. And this has been a problem for many historians who say that here is a man who is struggling for the very justifiable political rights of the Indians, but in the theater where there's a very much greater, in terms of volume and velocity, injustice being perpetrated on the Africans. Now, it is a fact that Gandhi did not become an advocate for the African cause, which itself was very new and young and nascent, just emerging. He did not join that. But Chief Bhambatha, whom he never met, gave him the opportunity to make some observations and plunge into action in a way that is supremely important today. I'd like to read here a very small description by Mohandas of what the Zulus had to undergo after what was called the Bhambatha rebellion. There was an attack by Zulus who were being unjustly subjected to a poll tax, and 2 white officers were done to death. As a result of this, in retaliation, a huge movement was launched, armed movement by the British authorities to crush the rebellion, and 12 of the Zulus who were supposed to have been in the mud were blown at the mouth of a cannon, and Bhambatha was among them.
They were made to stand in front of a cannon and blown to pieces by the British. How barbaric can you get? What role did Gandhi play, if any, in the Zulu movement?
Now, Gandhi, as an Indian subject of the British Empire, joined the expedition against the Zulus, but as a stretcher bearer to tend the wounded and the dying. And he says, we were to dress the wounds on the backs of several natives who had received lashes. He found that the wounded Zulus would have been left uncared for unless we had attended to them. The Zulus could not talk to us, but from their gestures and the expressions of their eyes, they seemed to feel as if God had sent us to their succor. I shall never forget, says he, the lacerated backs of Zulus who had received stripes and were brought to us for nursing, because no white nurse was prepared to look after them. And I had an insight into what war by white men against colored races meant. And yet, those who perpetrated these cruelties called themselves Christians. This was no war, but a manhunt. So Bhambatha gave Gandhi a sense of violent racism, which has not gone from the world even today, and which is why Mandela and Martin Luther King Jr. were drawn to Gandhi in the way they were. And also contemporary Africans like John Dewey, who was one of the founding fathers of the African National Congress, became an associate of Gandhi in South Africa. And so while Gandhi did not become part of the struggle for African self-esteem and African liberation, thanks to Chief Bhambatha and the Zulu rebellion in particular, he knew what violent racism meant and what in the future he was going to do about racism in India.